All right, fun. This is when I get to share my stories about how my other siblings left the church before me. At this time, I was pretty much telling people in my family that I left the church and I don't believe it anymore. And I talked to my older brother and my siblings, and they all left the church, so they're just like, whatever. But I talked to my dad once, and he took it well too. Anyway, this is another episode of My Mormon Memory. If this is the first time you're listening, go back to the very beginning and get caught up. In the last episode, I talked about how I talked to my wife and my bishop for the first time, that I was down in the church and I stopped going. I was okay with the fact that my wife was still a Mormon and going to church, and my kids were going too, but I was really concerned about that. I'm just like, whatever you guys believe in, I'm fine with that. And this is what I believe in, and I don't want to go anymore. So at this time, I meet up with my dad for lunch during the day. You know, we take a lunch break from our jobs, and I met with my dad for a couple of times. You know, we have a couple of lunch together, and we talk about that. And I talked to him about how I don't believe in the church anymore, and he just kept saying, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's okay to doubt the church. Everyone has their own journey, but don't throw it all out right now." And that's what he said. And he took it pretty well, but he was still I can tell he was still kind of hurt by that. And I told him some of the issues, and I didn't really talk about too much of the issues with him, but I did talk about the changes in the temple, and he looked at me and he was just like, "So?" And he kind of said that to me. He's just like, "So what? You know, change happens, you know." But my dad was less active for a lot of years, and then he kind of went in and out. And it wasn't because he doubted the church. He told me that time sitting down. My dad doesn't like to sit around. He's a hard worker, you know, and he just didn't like sitting around for 3 hours, and that's why he was inactive most of my childhood, and my mom too, and that's what I told him. And I told him, like, don't blame yourself for me leaving the church. It had nothing to do with you guys being less active or the way you guys raised me. This is stuff that I discovered, and I this is the life that I want, and I just don't believe it anymore. And I think I'm atheist now, or an agnostic. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure things out now. I'm throwing everything out. And so I'm going to talk more about this in phase 3, what I believe in today. Phase 1, which is, I believe this is the last episode of phase 1, is my faith crisis, when I started doubting the church and the journey of that, and when I became true blue Mormon to non-believer in a matter of 2 or 3 years. Phase 2, which will be the next episode, is when I start talking about my entire childhood, my Mormon upbringing, how my mom joined the church, how I moved to America and grew up in Utah and dealt with some good and bad things, being raised Mormon, so everything, all the way up to about the time this podcast began. And then phase 3, I'll just talk about what I believe in today, and who knows, we'll go from there. I don't know how many episodes this is going to be, but we'll just keep moving forward then. Anyway, so this episode here is the final episode of phase 1. This is just, I'm just brought up, I talked to my dad about doubting the church, and he took it pretty well. And I'm going to talk about the times when my siblings left the church. First, I'm going to talk about my brother. My older brother and I, we were both from England originally, and we grew up. I'm going to mention this in the next episodes, phase 2 of this podcast. We grew up Mormon, and we both served missions. And my brother, he served a mission in California, and he was in the seminary council in high school. Seminary council is where the youth in high school, they're part of like a group, like a student body kind of thing, but for seminary in Utah. So he was a part of that. He was really high up in the church. He was really active in the church. He would go to the temple. And when he was a senior in high school, he was really active, and he was a part of the seminary council and in the high school that we went to. And after high school, he lost his best friend. I'll talk about this in the next phase in this podcast. He lost his best friend, and he kind of had a meltdown. He kind of went downhill, and he eventually stopped going to church and kind of he kind of became a rebel, he kind of being a badass, and kind of went downhill a little bit. And he then eventually decided to turn his life around and served a mission. And he was just like, fine, I'm going to serve a mission because everyone in the family has, and our dad has, and a lot of the cousins and people in the world are serving missions, and I need to turn my life around because I'm just going down a dark path here. So he decided to serve a mission, and he got called to go to Long Beach, California, and he went out on his mission, and he had to go through the temple for the first time. And I still remember we went to the Manti temple, so it was the live session, and because our grandpa, he was a temple worker in Manti, so we went down there, and my brother, I remember after we got out of the temple, he went through the endowment session. He looked like he saw a ghost. He was just like, I've never seen my brother. Like before we were driving there, he was all goofing off and just being silly like he was. He's what he does. And then on the way home, he was just like, he wasn't hungry. He wasn't talking. He even turned off the radio and he just didn't say anything. It was just silent on the way, on the 2-hour trip home from Manti. And I'm just like, what happened in there? And I'll mention this later in the podcast as well, my experience going through the temple for the first time, but it like traumatized him. And then he went on the mission and he went to the MTC and he had a pretty good time in the MTC. And then his first 3 or 4 months in the mission field was really good. He had a pretty good trainer. But eventually he started noticing corruption in his mission. His mission president wasn't a very good person, to say the least. The whole mission was all based off of favoritism and backstabbing and ratting people out to the mission president if they misbehave, or, if a missionary slept in for 5 minutes, the mission companion had to call the mission president or the zone leader about it, and then the missionary would get in trouble. That's pretty much what would happen, and then that missionary would get promoted eventually in the mission, and that's what the mission was known for, and that's what was going on. And my brother hated it. My brother does not like to rat people out. I don't like it either. Like if someone and it was over the dumbest things, like if someone had headphones on listening to, even if it was church music, you couldn't do that. And then he'll call the mission president behind your back, and then, stuff like that. And I dealt with this stuff on my mission too, but my brother dealt with it a ton on his mission. And I like to talk more about my brother's mission. That could be a whole nother episode in itself. I might actually eventually have him talk about it in this podcast if this thing actually goes anywhere, which I doubt. It was just the craziest thing. And then he dealt with a few really tough missionary companions who were really hard to get along with and just would tattletale on him every time my brother did something that was somewhat against the mission rules, even if it was minor. Like he took a longer shower, or was in the bathroom longer, or he had a picture of a girl. He had a picture of a sister missionary in his binder or something, just something weird like that. He would get called up to the mission president, and then one day the mission president, I don't remember the guy's name. He asked my brother, "Are you gonna? If you see anyone misbehaving in my mission, I want you to talk to me about it, and I want you to tell me if there's any missionaries breaking the rules in my mission." And my brother's like, "Well, I don't want to do that." My brother's mission president slams his fist on the table. He's just like, "Don't give me that. I'm the mission president, not you. Whatever I say goes." That's pretty much what he said. And he's just like, "You do what I tell you." And he was just a total jerk to my brother. And my brother was really shocked by that. He was still kind of naive about Mormon leadership being almost close to godliness, and he had a pretty good experience in the seminary council and the bishop back home, but this mission president just chews him out because he did not want to rat on his missionary companions. He didn't want to do that. And he yells at my brother, and then afterwards he gives him a hug. He's just like, "I don't want to lose you. Sorry about that." Just like, okay. And my brother never really trusted him after that. And my brother actually had 2 mission presidents. I only had 1, but he had 2, and he was just like, I don't trust him after that. And then later on, my brother had a really tough companion and his own leader in his apartment. And every time my brother did something, they would just rat him out, and he would get a call from the mission president, and he would get yelled at by the mission president for something he did. Like maybe he said something inappropriate or something, or maybe he slept in a little bit or took a nap in the afternoon during lunch. I don't know. It was just over the dumbest stuff. It wasn't really anything serious. It was just the minor rules, because Mormons, they're the best Pharisees. They really are, and he found out the hard way that that's how the mission was, and how a lot of missions in church culture was. It was all a very ratting people out kind of culture, very toxic. And then one time my brother he had some pictures of girls that he knew back home, and he also had a picture with a sister missionary that he was good friends with. He wasn't flirting with her or doing anything stupid, but he had a picture with her. And one of the missionaries in the apartment called the mission president on him, and my brother had to take the binder to the mission president and show him all the pictures of the girls he had in his binder. And my brother, as all missionaries, they love to take pictures and develop them and have them on a record, on a binder. And that's what I did. He had some pictures of girls on there, and it wasn't inappropriate pictures. The missionary, the zone leader, had a cow about that. And so he's showing the mission president all the binders and all of his binders, even his letters from home, and all the blue planners that he had, and making sure that there's no inappropriate content and stuff in the binders. And the mission president's all like, "What's this? Who's this? Who's this girl here? Oh, it's my sister." It's just stuff like that. And then one of them was he had my brother's an artist. He likes to sketch and doodle, and he had on his blue planner that week P day. Like P day is preparation day, when you don't work most of the day. You have to do laundry, and it was called P day, which stands for preparation day. And he drew the P like it was kind of a weird looking design on the blue planner on the day, and it was just a giant P, but it kind of looked like it had like kind of a tail, kind of a tadpole kind of tail. And the mission president said, he was just like, "Is that a sperm?" Like my brother, he told me this, he thought it was funny, but the mission president looked at him, he's just like, points at the thing, "Is that a sperm?" Because it looks like semen, it looks like a sperm. And my brother was like, "No, it's just a pea with a little wavy bottom." It's just so stupid. And I think this was his other mission president, not the first one that yelled at him. And then what eventually happened, he didn't get sent home or anything for this. He's just like, do not write to sister missionaries, do not take pictures with them, and you can keep these pictures, but don't look at them. Just so dumb. And my brother's like, whatever. And then things get a little more interesting. In the mission, there was a secret group in this mission called the Bald Eagles, and there were a bunch of missionaries who had literally shaved their their pubic hair. And it was a secret club in the mission. There was missionaries that were, I don't know how long they were doing this, and then they would have like handshakes and stuff to get in. It was like a secret club. And the mission president cracked down on this. The other one didn't, but this mission president, and he was just gonna, the previous mission president didn't really do much about this, but this guy was just like, "No secret combinations." And he ended up calling like 100 missionaries into his office. "Are you part of the Bald Eagles?" And they're like, "Yes," or "No," or whatever. And then he would send them home, or he would send them to, supposedly this went all the way up to the general authorities. Like it went up to Elder Eyring or Oaks, I don't remember. And they would send missionaries home or to other missions if they shaved their pubic hair and were part of this secret club. And my brother was accused of being a part of this club, and he's told me I was not a part of this stupid club. All right. And the mission president interrogated him. He even had a recorder. He recorded the whole meeting, and and this guy was a former lawyer, go figure. Most leaders in the Mormon church are either doctors or lawyers. My mission president was a doctor. This guy was a lawyer, and he was just like interrogating my brother. "Are you part of the Bald Eagles?" And he's just like, "No, I'm not." And of course, how is he going to prove it? My brother even like cracked a joke. He's just like, "Want me to show you? Let me unzip my pants or something?" And it was the dumbest thing. And my mission president's like, "Okay, well, you better not be lying to me, but I'm going to have to punish you anyway. You cannot baptize a single person for the rest of your mission. My brother only had like a month left, and he was going to baptize this guy he was teaching for a long time, for like 6 months. He was in this last area for a long time in Long Beach, and there was a man that he spent all that time trying to convert, and he eventually had a baptism date right before he went home. And before my brother went home, and the mission president's like, "You cannot baptize him because of this." And he got punished anyway, and my brother was so upset about that. And then my brother was just like, had to tell the guy wanted my brother to baptize him, and he had to tell him, "No, I can't do it now," but he couldn't say why. So his companion baptized him instead, and then he went home, and he was so upset about that. And he had his own leader that would just rat on him all the time, but then he would always talk to like girls in the ward outside of his apartment. It's just a lot of hypocrisy and self-righteousness. And it was just terrible. Like my brother hated his mission, and then he got home and he was just like, "I hated it." And he told me, he's like, "I hated every waking moment of it." And he was able to come home honorably. He served the 2 years, but he hated his mission, and he had a lot of missionary companions that he didn't get along with. And I know my brother was kind of a hothead, but there was just so many missionaries that did not like him, and they just ratted him out the whole time. And then those missionaries become APs and high up in the mission. And my brother was never a district leader, or he had no leadership position. I think he was only a senior companion once. Yeah, it was a disaster. And then my brother got home from his mission, and about the time I left on my mission, he married this what looked like a very nice Mormon girl from a very strict Mormon family in Taylorsville. And she ended up cheating on him a year later, and her Mormon family thought my brother was the bad guy, and they were talking all kinds of crap about him and thinking he was the bad guy, but it was their daughter that cheated on him, her ex-boyfriend. And it was just horrible. And this happened during my mission. I'll mention this later as well, but when I talk about my mission. But it was just a nightmare. And my poor brother, he was cheated on by his wife, who he thought was a really good Mormon girl. They were super active in the church. Their family was super active, like really active. They were weirdos. That's how active they were. My brother eventually just fell away from the church then, and eventually he still wanted to go to church. So a couple of years later, and this was after my mission, we were driving to the Singles World in South Jordan. There was a car this was back when nothing was out there. It was nothing out there. It was all farmland, and there was this car that was going really slow. So my brother tries to overtake them. They were going at least 10 under the speed limit. And my brother, this was a legal pass, there was only a 1-lane country road, and there was no traffic out there except this car. And my brother tries to overtake them. And this car, which had like a couple girls in it, they speed up as my brother was trying to overtake them. And now they're going like 10 over the speed limit when my brother's trying to overtake them. And then my brother gets upset. And then they also, I was in the car too. And I remember, I swear this car like merged or kind of swerved into us as my brother was passing them. And then my brother was really pissed off at them. And I think when we stopped at a 4-way stop, he like got out and like yelled at them, like, what were you trying to do? Trying to kill me? And he gets back in the car and drives off. And then they followed us and called the police. And then, the police like followed my brother home with something, and they gave him a citation. And my brother was absolutely pissed off. And he's just like, that's it. I'm never going to church again. And he wanted to go back to church. He wanted to go back to church and try it again. He wanted to be a better person because he was kind of, going down kind of a wrong path. And then the one day that he went to church, that happened. And he kind of just went off, and he's never been back to church since. And that was my brother's story. And then my sister, I had a sister who was active in the church, and we were both living in St. George at the time. And we were driving back to Salt Lake during breaks from a semester at Dixie State College. And my sister was driving, and this is when I thought we were both active. And she was just like, yeah, I don't go to church anymore. And I'm just like, what? And she was working at Lake Powell and stuff, and she knew a lot of non-Mormons there. And she was just like, these people are the nicest people I've ever met. I dated a bunch of returned missionaries, and they treated me like crap, but then I'm dating this guy who's from Scotland, and he's not even like religious whatsoever. And he's the sweetest guy I've ever met. Such a nice guy, such a good guy. He treats me well, but I dated a bunch of RMs, and they're such jerks to me and so mean to me and stuff. And I remember I was shocked. I'm just like, what? You're leaving the church too, just like my older brother? And I was kind of really sad to hear that. But at the same time, I'm just like, what if she's right? There's a lot of good people outside of the Mormon church. It's not just, we're kind of in this bubble where we think this is it, and everyone outside of the world is scary. The world is scary, but inside the Mormon church, everything's good. And it's really not. It's really sad and really harsh. And that is how my one sister left the church. And then I had another sister who left the church where she went to BYU, Hawaii. She moved to BYU, Hawaii. She moved to Hawaii, and I don't really know her full story, but she attended a few semesters at BYU, Hawaii. And then eventually she married a non-Mormon from Idaho, and she doesn't go to church anymore. And I don't know too much of that story, but he's a cool guy. He's in the military, non-Mormon, awesome guy. All right. And I'm pretty sure from what I heard, my sister also dated a lot of returned missionaries in BYU, Hawaii, and she wasn't treated very well. And then she met a non-member, and she was treated very well. And she figured out people outside of the church are just as nice, or much more normal and nicer than people in. So she stopped going to the church, and she became less active. And then I have a few other siblings that were kind of less active as well, but they just, I don't know what their story is, but they're not active. And I was pretty much the last one. I was the last sibling in my family. I mean, I was the first of the cousins of that family to get married in the temple. I was a returned missionary, and I was kind of the example. And then I told my dad that I was leaving the church too, and it was really hard. I was really scared to do that because, I loved the church. I loved it. Even though I didn't really like the culture and some of the people that I met, I loved it. I loved being a Mormon. It was hard at times, and I was really depressed a lot of the times, but I loved the idea of eternal families. I wanted the church to be true. I really did. I wanted it. I was planning on just being Mormon the rest of my life and looking forward to the afterlife when we can all be together as a family. That's what I was looking forward to. And then I found out it's not true, and I was devastated. I was really hurt by that. And it took kind of a community away from me because now I'm not a part of the community anymore. But anyway, so that's where I'm left off on. So how did I get here? How did I get to this part of my life? I'm 30, and at this point in this story, I'm at least 35, 36 years old. I have left the church. I've discovered that the Mormon church was a lie, and I was terrified to move on with my life. And the whole universe, the whole rug was swept underneath my feet, and I had to reconstruct everything. And I had to rethink my entire upbringing from when I was a little kid all the way to that point. What was true? What wasn't true? And it was scary to look forward into my life, feeling like, okay, well, I have to reconstruct everything. What is logical, what isn't, and what is true and what isn't. And I don't want to get fooled anymore. And so that ends phase 1 of this podcast. I just uncovered my entire faith crisis, my whole shelf breaking moment, from the moment when I was a true blue Mormon to inactive and no longer consider myself a believer. Okay, so the next phase is phase 2. That would be the next episode. I have no idea how many episodes it's going to be. It's probably going to be a lot. I'm going to talk about my Mormon upbringing. It's going to start out with my childhood when I was a kid in the UK and my mom joins the church and we moved to Utah. My experience being raised Mormon in Utah, serving a mission, and all that stuff, all the way to the point where this podcast began. So that is what's going to happen next. That's what's to expect next. And hopefully you guys can join me there too, because it's going to get really interesting. Anyway, thanks for listening to this podcast. This concludes phase 1 of this podcast. If you want to review and like this podcast, go ahead, do that. Share this podcast to anyone who you feel like has gone through something similar. And I want people to know that they're not crazy. It's okay to doubt stuff that doesn't make sense. And it's not the end of the world. Life happens afterwards, and it has happened. There's a lot more in life than what you think. Anyway, thanks for listening. See ya. Bye.